Remember the Calgary Stampeders? I'm actually not going to be talking about football in this episode, in my Remember the Calgary Series for episode 15. But we're going to talk about the Calgary Stampeders hockey teams. And I did intentionally say teams, as the Calgary Stampeders for the hockey, there were various Calgary Stampeders teams that played in various senior hockey leagues that I'll talk about in my Remember the Calgary Series, where I take a look at Calgary sports teams from the past. And I'd say it's very interesting that there was a Calgary Stampeders hockey team long before the football team that has been around in the Canadian Football League since 1945 for over 75 years. But this Calgary team that I'm going to talk about has been around in various levels for almost 40 years. So I'm going to still say, I always have to ask the question at the beginning of my Remember the Calgary series about, do you remember this team? I'm going to say, looking at most of the demographics that watch my videos, would say no, because we're looking at a period in the 1940s to 1970s. So depending on where you stand, you might be aware of the Calgary Stampeders hockey team, but you probably don't remember them, ever seen them in action. And then, speaking of football and Calgary Stampeders, in the last episode, in episode 14, I actually talked about the Calgary Broncs, who are a rugby and football team. Yeah, that was the last football team that Calgary had that eventually evolved into the current day Calgary Stampeders football team. So, but we're not talking football in this episode. We'll be talking hockey, and I'd say both with the football team today and the hockey team from the past. It's also cleverly named for the greatest outdoor hero on earth, the Calgary Stampede. So yeah, U Sports will promote the Calgary Stampede by calling your team the Calgary Stampeders. And I did find, I felt that this episode was going to take a little more work, because there were various leagues that the Calgary Stampeders hockey team played in. And obviously I was able to find some relics, mostly with the hockey database, but I also found this Hockey Gods website as well. And then, what inspired me to do the Remember the Calgary series was when I did the Calgary Hitman Corral series a couple years ago. I might have to dig through some of my pictures that I might have taken of some Calgary Stampeders hockey teams, so that's what inspired me to do this, as well as the clothing company, local clothing company, Sea of Dead Clothing, as well as that Chris Wilson story where it talked about, his hockey jersey collection. And he did actually have some Calgary Stampeders hockey jerseys, and there were various forms of that logo that I saw of the Calgary Stampeders. So I picked this one that I have on my thumbnail for this episode. So let's talk about the Calgary Stampeders hockey. So let's clarify what I'm talking hockey in this episode. So the Calgary Stampeders are a defunct ice hockey team that was based obviously here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, hence the name Remember the Calgary series. This team existed from 1938 till 1972, so it has a very long history. But they played in several leagues, various senior, amateur, and minor professional leagues during that time. And in 1946, the Calgary Stampeders did something significant, as they won the Allen Cup as the Canadian Senior Hockey Champions, and were the first base team in Alberta to do so. So it's also significant to mention that the Calgary Stampeders hockey team was the first team to win the Allen Cup, which is the trophy that gets awarded to senior hockey leagues. Usually it's older players that play in the league. And also, I also looked up as well during that one time the Calgary Stampeders Hockey Club was affiliated with the Chicago Blackhawks franchise as well. And there's a few significant names that once you get to where I talk about NHL alumni, that piqued my eye when I was going through my notes. And then the last Calgary Stampeders team that was around was in 1978-79. They were in the Western International Hockey League, but I know that league folded midway through that season, so that is the last time that we've had Calgary Stampeders hockey. I know, and I also go back to episode 7, where I talked about the time when we had the Calgary Cardinals and the Calgary Expos baseball team. When I was doing notes for that, I also found out that there was a Calgary Stampeders baseball team that existed in the 1910s. I just snuck that in. I didn't find much information on it, but about rosters or records in that. But here I find plenty of records and some rosters that I can use to show, and obviously all the links I put in the description below, where I get my information and relics from that I share in my videos. So that's just the gist of the Calgary Stampeders hockey team. So it some history. I mean, let's just go over all the leagues first that the Calgary Stampeders were part of. The first rendition from 1938 to 1941, they were in the Alberta Senior League, and then 1941-1942 for one season, it was in the Alberta-British Columbia Senior League. So there were some British Columbia teams that joined in. So that league rebranded. Then I think they didn't play a couple seasons due to the Second World War. Excuse me. So in the 1945 to 1951, they were also a part of the Western Canadian Senior Hockey League. Then in 1951-52, they were in the Pacific Coast Hockey League. Then 1952 to 1963, excuse me, they were in the Western Hockey League, and not the same Western Hockey League that the Calgary Hitmen play in, but there was a different variation of the rendition of the Western Hockey League. And then in 1968 to 1971, so there was a little gap when we didn't have a Calgary Stampeders hockey team. This one played in the Alberta Senior Hockey League again, and then 1971-1972 for one season. They were in the Prairie Hockey League, and then the last season of the Calgary Stampeders Hockey Club in 1978-1979, and they only played half of the season before folding. They were in the Western International Hockey League. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 leagues. So the Calgary Stampeders hockey team played in over 8 leagues from 1938 until 1979. So I figured it was going to take a little more work to prepare this episode, but I can build based on what I could find in terms of relics and all that. So that's where all the leagues they played in. So I'm going to paraphrase a bit. 1945-96, the year when they won the Allen Cup, which is the trophy award to the top senior hockey league. They were the powerhouse in the Western Canadian Senior Hockey League. They were led by Ken Red Hunter's then senior amateur record of 81 points. And since the Stamps finished first overall in the WCSHL with a 28-7-1 record, earned a bye to the league championship, and they were quickly dispatched by the Edmonton Flyers 4-1, and then they beat the Edmonton Flyers, I should say. Then the Stamps faced there was a Winnipeg Orioles team in the Prairie Championship. While Winnipeg was coach, predicted that Calgary would sweep them in 3 games. It was instead the Stampeders eliminated Winnipeg in 3 games by 5-1, 10-2, and 8-2 games. And then the Western Canada Final, Stamps once again handled easily their opponents. There was the Trail Smoke Eaters. That's another team that I've heard of in the past, based out of British Columbia. And it said here, after tying the first 2 games, Calgary won the next 2 the first 2 games, Calgary won the next 2, 7-3 and 4-2, to reach the Allen Cup, and they played against the Hamilton Tigers. I know Hamilton's also had various teams that donned that name in various sports. I mean, now, because there was the Hamilton Tigers, who were the first NHL team back in the 1920s. And then now you got the Hamilton Tiger Cats, another team that kind of dons that same moniker that plays in the Canadian Football League. This series almost never happened. So the Allen Cup, the Calgary, I don't know if history played differently, could be won by default. But with the tournament scheduled to be held out west, the Hamilton players considered foregoing the Allen Cup, as the $6 per day that they were offered for the trip was not to be able to make for their time off from the jobs. Tigers did make the trip, however, and were easily dispatched by the Stampeders in 5 games, winning the 5th game by a 1-0 score in Edmonton before a crowd of 6,000 fans. So that was the only time that the Calgary Stampeders won the Allen Cup in 1946-47. We did reach to the Allen Cup final again, but we were defeated by the Montreal Royals. This sad game was held in Quebec City with over 11,000 fans. And then, as occurred frequently with senior hockey, growing concerns that were certainly regarding the status of players, and many were using former professionals in violation of the rules at the time of the Allen Cup Committee. Many teams, including the Stampeders, were faced with pressure to declare whether they were professional or amateur teams. So that's where it gets a little dicey about would you consider this team professional or amateur in the senior leagues. And then it talks about professional hockey. So this history was talking about the senior hockey, when we won the Allen Cup. But before they started the 1951-2 season, the Stampeders, along with their provincial cousins, the Edmonton Flyers, they were officially turned professional. They rejoined the Pacific Coast Hockey League, as I mentioned, which were renamed the Western Hockey League, which that's not the same Western Hockey League, as I mentioned, that the Calgary Hitmen play in. The WHL was the top professional hockey league in Western Canada, U.S. The Stampeders at that time also became a minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks, so we did have a lot of alumni, as I mentioned, that played with the Chicago Blackhawks. They also played with the Calgary Stampeders. The Stampeders quickly found success in the minor pro ranks as they captured the Western Hockey League title in 1953-54. Being there was a Vancouver Canucks team that played in that league before the Vancouver Canucks when they joined the NHL in 1970. 4-1, the Stampeders went on to face the Quebec Aces of the Quebec Hockey League in the Edinburgh Trophy for the championship of the Canadian Minor Professional Hockey League. Calgary won. Then they played the best-of-9 series in 6 games, with the clinching game held 4-2 in Calgary with a victory in front of 6,500 fans. And yes, the Calgary Stampeders did play much of their history in the old Stampede Corral. And then the Stampeders would reach the Western Hockey League final 3 more times. In 1955, falling to the Edmonton Flyers in the 4-game sweep. Damn Edmonton. I have to say that. 1958, they fell to the Canucks. Damn Vancouver. And in 1959, they fell to the Victoria Cougars. Because Victoria, if you look back on my Remember the Calgary Series where I talked about the Calgary Wranglers, Calgary actually lost to Victoria in the WHL final in 1981 to get the World Cup. So funny how things work sometimes in sports, even in different levels. But during this time, the Stampeders were one of the top draws in the league, including all playoff games. In 1953-54 season, the Stampeders drew over 3,000 fans in a city of 150,000. So we loved our hockey back then and some. In 1955-56, Calgary drew 157,803 fans to be precise. In the regular season, only second to the Winnipeg Warriors. So it tells you that Calgary then would say was proven to be a hockey market. And eventually we got our NHL team in 1980, and then the World Hockey Association team in the mid-1970s. In 1963, disenchanted with their affiliation with the Chicago Blackhawks, Stampeders took a 1 leave of absence. So that's where we got that one gap there. Gordon Love, the chairman of the Calgary Stampede Board, owners of the Stampeders, stated, "We've been treated so shabbily by Chicago that we had no alternative." And then it mentions Tommy Ivan simply wasn't interested in the future of hockey in Calgary, and that's all there is to it. So that's some dark times as well. Stampeders also lost $90,000 during that season. Ooh. Isolated in what was the most Pacific Coast League, Edmonton suspended operations along with Calgary. I guess that's just travel, because how far west there is. Neither team would resume operations as the Flyers decided they would not financially be able to stable at the old Edmonton Gardens where the Edmonton Flyers used to play, and Calgary could not go all along without an Edmonton team. So we needed the Battle of Alberta then as well. And then it talks about revivals, that the Calgary Stampeders name was revived for teams playing amateur senior hockey in later years. 3 seasons in the Alberta Senior Hockey League, 1 season in the Prairie Hockey League, and then 1 more season in the Western International Hockey League before it folded. So that's just the gist of the history of the various leagues that the Calgary Stampeders went through. I would say, for the most part, we were very, very successful, but unfortunately, I think just, where geographically we were relocated, the travel costs made it expensive as well. So that's why there was no Calgary Stampeders at the time, and they had a rocky relationship with the Chicago Blackhawks at the time as affiliation. So seeing my season record, well, in the first season, going back to 1938-39, I mean, the Alberta Senior Hockey League, there were 6-21-5, and then there was no season in 39 or 40 where they didn't play. Not too sure if that was because of the war, but in the Alberta Senior Hockey League, they didn't make the playoffs another season, or didn't say any playoffs as I know, but in 1940-41, in 30 games they were 17-13 for a respectable, just over 500 record. And then in 1941-42, the last season of the Alberta Senior, or it was the Alberta-BC Senior Hockey League, they were 22-6-4, so for 48 points in 1942. And then when it comes to the Western Canadian Senior Hockey League, I mean, obviously the year when they won the Allen Cup, in 1946, in 36 games, they were 28-7-1, where they won the Allen Cup. And actually, the first 3 seasons that they were in the Western Canadian Senior Hockey League, they were the best team in the league. Because in 46-47, 40 games, they were 27-9-4. They won first overall, and they won the league championship, but lost in the Allen Cup final. And then in 1947-48, in 48 games, they were 28-19-1. That was still good enough for first overall, but they lost in the final. And then in 1949-50, where they finished second overall, but won the league again, they were 22-23-5. So it must have been a weak league if that was second best and they were 1 game under 500. And then they were first overall in 1950-51 in the Western Canadian Senior Hockey League. They were 38-21-1 first overall. I'll have all the links to all the teams in the description below, so you can look back on who led the team in scoring and what records they had. But another prominent season in the Western Hockey League, 1953-54, in 70 games, they were 38-25-7. They were second overall, and they won the league championship that year. And then 1954-55, they were in 70 games, they were 29-29-12, so they were just 500, but finished fourth overall, but they lost in the final. And then 57-58, they were in 70 games, they were 30-35-5. They were third in the Prairie League, but they made it to the league final and lost. And then in 58-59 in 64 games, they had a much better record. They were 42-21-1. They were first in the Prairie League and lost in the final. And then in 1960-61 in the Western Hockey League, they were 44-22-4. They were first overall, but didn't say anything about playoffs, what they did that year. But yeah, this is when we get closer to the end of the Calgary Stampeders Hockey Club, as they didn't have as much success in the Alberta Senior Hockey League, or didn't mention anything about where they finished or what they did in the championship. But the last season, they only played 25 games in 1978-79, as they were 12-11-2 in 25 games, and they did not finish the season as they folded. So, I would say they had a lot of success overall. I mean, obviously, the biggest hardware being with the Allen Cup, and won a few league championships, and went to the final a few times, but 1946 would be the finest year of the Calgary Stampeders with the Allen Cup. And as I say, the Allen Cup, if I bring up the article that talks about the Allen Cup, and I'll have a picture of it as well in this video, is that the trophy is awarded annually to the National Senior Amateur Men's Hockey Championships of Canada. This one was donated by Sir Montague Allen of Ravenscag, Montreal, and he has competed for it since 1909. So that's another trophy that with significant history in Canadian history, there with the Stanley Cup and the Grey Cup, as well as the Memorial Cup. The current champions are the Lacombe Generals, who captured the 2019 Allen Cup in Lacombe, Alberta. So the Calgary Stampeders were the first team to win it for Alberta, but it's also won a few times by Alberta teams. Obviously in 2020 there was no Allen Cup championship because of the global pandemic. But the most titles that has gone for the Allen Cup was the Port Arthur Bearcats and the Thunder Bay Twins, as they each won it 9 times. So there's the Allen Cup as well. And I think the Calgary Stampeders, as I know, would be the only team that has won it. Because haven't found any other Calgary-based teams that has won the Allen Cup since then. And as I know that there is no senior hockey league that Calgary has right now that can compete for it to have any chance of hoping to win an Allen Cup. So that's also why it's also important for me to put this Calgary Stampeders team in this history as well, in this video series. So yeah, it's various links and various relics that I'll share in this video of the Calgary Stampeders. So that's all I have for the Calgary Stampeders, and finding out on the hockey gods with the Calgary Stampeders hockey team. So as I was saying, let's take a look at some notable alumni that played for the Calgary Stampeders that played in the NHL. Here's a few names that stand out for me that I know that played with the Calgary Stampeders that also played in the NHL. Well, the first name that came to my mind right away is Doug Barkley. And I believe this is the same Doug Barkley who was the defenseman that he was the head coach of the Detroit Red Wings on 2 separate occasions. He is from Lethbridge, Alberta. He did play for the Chicago Blackhawks and the Detroit Red Wings from 1956 to 1966. I believe this is the same Doug Barkley, if you go way back with the Calgary Flames play-by-play. Then I remember Peter Marr actually had a color commentator with Doug Barkley, and I think this is the same Doug Barkley that played with the Calgary Stampeders as well as the Chicago Blackhawks. That's where you see a lot more notable NHL alumni that played for the Calgary Stampeders. Another name that also stands out when I looked at all the names, and it was this last name, is Lou Jankowski. And Lou Jankowski, who is no longer with us, but Louis Casimir Jankowski, who was born in June 27, 1931, and was around until March 21st, 2010. He was a hockey forward scout who played 130 games in the NHL, and he had a prolific career in the Western Hockey League. He is from Regina, Saskatchewan, and died in Florida, Clearwater, Florida. He was a center right wing that played for the Chicago Blackhawks and the Detroit Red Wings. However, you might think that last name, sounds very familiar. I'll just find it right here that he is related to Mark Jankowski, who plays for the, or now he signed with the Pittsburgh Penguins, but Mark Jankowski, who we drafted back in 2012, he is related to Mark Jankowski. He is the grandson of Mark Jankowski. So this is Mark Jankowski's grandfather, Lou Jankowski. And I think if you look back on the clip, as controversial as that draft pick was at the time when the Calgary Flames drafted Mark Jankowski, I know Peter McGuire gets too extra excited. He mentioned Lou Jankowski, and I think he is also related to, I believe, Red Kelly, a Montreal Canadiens legend as well. But that name picked out when I saw Jankowski. I was like, is there any relation to Mark Jankowski? So Mark Jankowski's grandfather played for the Calgary Stampeders Hockey Club. So there is some kind of a roundabout way that he was meant to be, that Mark Jankowski played for the Calgary Flames. And then unfortunately, there was a recent death, but actually Fred Saskamoose, who recently passed away, was the first Canadian Indigenous hockey player that played in the NHL. He also played for the Calgary Stampeders because he also played with the Chicago Blackhawks from 1953 to 1960. He was born in Debden, Saskatchewan, and unfortunately passed away most recently. I believe he actually did get COVID, and they will put them down as the cause of death, but that was just very interesting how that played out as well. So Doug Barkley, who I remember more as he was color commentator for Peter Marr with Calgary Flames Radio, and then Lou Jankowski with being the grandfather of Mark Jankowski, and then Fred Saskamoose. Yes, he also played for the Calgary Stampeders as the first Indigenous player to play in the National Hockey League. So it's kind of weird how things play out, but rest in peace, obviously, for most recently with Fred Saskamoose. But that's why I just found it interesting when I looked at the NHL alumni. I was like, wow, those names definitely look familiar for local hockey fans as well. But what do you think of the Calgary Stampeders Hockey Club? As it was very interesting that, even though if you think about the Calgary Stampeders today, as Calgary sports fans, you're thinking about the football team, but this case we're talking about Calgary Stampeders hockey, and to kind of not make this video too long, as the various other leagues to talk about and just go over the leading scores and that, I have all the links in the description below for where I got from the hockey database, as well as many relics that I found, from the hockey database. And I think I'll have to go through some pictures that I found. I think I did take some pictures of some Calgary Stampeders hockey when I was doing the Calgary Hitman Corral series. And now that I actually got a more powerful laptop and a new laptop, I might be able to make these videos a lot faster as well and be less painful to go through files as well. But what do you think about the Calgary Stampeders hockey? Do you have any members of the Calgary Stampeders hockey if you are watching this? I don't know. I'm going to think most people probably don't even know that we had a hockey team called the Calgary Stampeders, and I know it's very historic that we were the first Alberta-based team at the time to win the Allen Cup, who has been awarded to the top amateur senior hockey club in the country. And then in the next episode that I plan to talk about, which will be episode 16 in my Remember the Calgary series, I'm going to talk about another historic hockey team from the past, the Calgary Canadians, as they also did something very historic way back in the day as well. So that's how I continue on in my Remember the Calgary series, where we talk about Calgary sports teams from the past. And if you go back to my playlist and look at my introduction video, I outline all the teams that I have already talked about now that I made that video, and teams that I still plan to talk about in the future. And yes, I did purposely put towards the end of the series the Cannons and the Calgary Stampede Wrestling, because I think those would be the ones that most Calgary sports fans have missed the most. But it's been a fun project to look back on Calgary sports teams from the past, and I always find some interesting relics that I feel it's important that I share and put in this video series, and just have something to look back on years from the road. As it's amazing that how many sports teams Calgary's had in the past. As I already talked about some basketball teams, some hockey teams, which is going to encompass most of the series, but we had some, as I said, soccer teams, basketball teams, some football teams, some old football teams, and even some soccer teams, and obviously baseball. As I still have some more baseball teams to talk about in this series. So what else do you think about the Calgary Stampeders? Feel free to comment, and I have all the links in the description to share what I did to get my notes and where I got my relics from, to credit all the sources and obviously my inspirations for doing this Remember the Calgary series. So as I say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, home of the Flames have been Roughnecks and Stampeders, and formerly the Calgary Stampeders hockey team, so not to confuse the football team. I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, but as I say, this has been a fun series to talk about Calgary sports teams from the past. I also do have personal vlogs, attempt to comedy, and I also do have share my experience with them on the road or at a sport event. Let's say, for example, I did share a little bit from the Calgary Hitman Corral series. So if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fans journey, what you need to do, just make sure you subscribe. I also have my other social media down in the description below for other ways you can follow me and get some tidbits and updates on my channel. So I guess you could say, go Stamps go, talking about the hockey club. And I'll see you in the next video or the next episode, whatever you choose to watch. So thanks for watching, and enjoy some more Calgary Stampeders relics. And we'll have to keep clarifying, and we're talking about the hockey club, and won the Allen Cup, and had some interesting alumni that stuck out to me right away in the past that I would say many Calgary sports fans and other sports fans would be familiar with as well. So thank you. I'll see you then.